Welcome to Classes in Session, presented by UI Health. I'm Doug Glanville. Policing is founded on the concept of team. It also has been a central conversation in many of the moments with athletes who have chosen to engage on issues of social justice. This conversation has been underscored by the dynamics of identity in our country, but also by the role of police itself. Its roots go back to a time when our country was grappling and even at war with itself. This divide frayed along lines that still define race today. Today is also notable because time has shown similarities to the culture of policing and the culture in many clubhouses throughout sports. The camaraderie, the common goal, the defense of each other, even the silence, is often expected in such a world. Yet policing has much higher stakes in the communities they serve. With protection comes a mandate to sort crime from innocence, threat from support. Today, we consider the long-standing relationship between sport and policing, both of which celebrate the value of teamwork. We will discuss this connection with Glenn O'Reilly, 31 years as an officer and former chief of police of my hometown of Teaneck, New Jersey, and Adam Jones, longtime MLB player, All-Star, and outspoken voice of social change during his playing career. Let's get to class. As a baseball player for all of my early life, I became acutely aware of the relationship between police and baseball. The awareness started by making a prestigious summer league team in my hometown, the Teaneck Lancers, managed by Gene O'Reilly, lead detective at our local police department. His son, Glenn, was my teammate. My early introduction to policing was being united in a baseball family. A good number of Lancers would go into law enforcement for my brothers or my teams. From there, I learned of a shared history, from both baseball players and officers clawing for more rights through a tough and effective union. Police and baseball also share the tradition of having a presence in just about every town in America, from the largest cities to the most isolated communities. Given my baseball history with teammates and coaches from law enforcement, I leaned into the positive when an out-of-town officer stopped me in my driveway while I was shoveling snow. When he asked me if I was making money for other people, it was a pivotal moment for me. I worried about my safety, the critical nature of what I did next, and my family's sense of security. My next steps in advocacy from this incident were still colored by a positive experience through sports, that I could lean into the best of what should be, not the worst. There was privilege in that decision, but the outcome was positive. A new law was written, and 18 months of engagement opened up significant conversations on policing and communities. We are in a period when athletes are vocal on issues of social importance through the platform sports have afforded them. We find policing and race meeting at the forefront of those discussions. It has elevated conversations around police culture and how far it needs to move from its early origins as enforcer of black codes in Jim Crow America. The death of unarmed citizens of color has changed the focus at lightning speed, with George Floyd as a flashpoint that has underscored the real power in what videos have allowed us to witness. It has also raised new questions about race when black police officers in Memphis kill a black citizen with the kind of inhumanity that was framed when white officers were judge, jury, and executioner. It points to a culture as much as it does America's racial history, forcing all of us to look at training and systemic issues that are challenging to change at best. The finality of death at the base of the upholders of the law has brought many out of their stick-to-sport shells, crawling into NBA bubbles, marches for Black life, ribbon lines, and gestures to express support for change. The names of those lost have become rallying cries in a shared identity. They may be performative at times, but they also are still expressing a sports culture that is willing to engage. Will we lean into being teammates in this quest for balance between law enforcement and the communities it serves, or will we be rivals on the same field? We're thrilled to have our next guest, Glenn O'Reilly, a longtime police officer, 31 years of service, 6 years as chief of police in our hometown of Teaneck, New Jersey. And that's right, our hometown where we played summer league baseball together, where his dad was our manager. And so we have a long history, and I think he's the perfect guest to bring context about the relationship between sports and policing and larger issues around society. So Glenn, it's great to see you, and a little grayer, but glad you could join us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Doug. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon.
Yeah, no, I mentioned our many years in summer league ball, and I think that's the foundation where we learned about team, what it means to be a team. So I wanted to hear from your first person experience about the connection between the police culture and sports culture and how it served you.
So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is teamwork, right? You're on a team, a baseball team, a police department. It's the same thing. It's about working together with people from maybe different backgrounds, different beliefs, but having a common goal and working towards that common goal as one team or one unit. There are divergent personalities and people with different beliefs, and you learn how to work together for a common good or a common cause.
Well, and Glenn, I always think back, and it's interesting that playing summer league ball, I became so familiar with police officers. It was such a natural connection with your dad. And so I was very comfortable from jump. I mean, riding in a cruiser, going by your house or whatever it may be. And so I'm curious about how you took some of those sports lessons and how you allowed it to bolster how you were able to serve in policing or as a leader, as a chief. I mean, how did you use those lessons to communicate to your personnel?
So for me, I think it was always about communication and setting expectations. And I think when we played baseball, we knew what the expectation was: win, right? So for law enforcement, it's a little bit different. It's about providing the best services we can. So I think the best way to do that is to set expectations for your employees. So to let them know this is what we expect of you, and to have rules and regulations. And it allows for the officer to know ahead of time, well, this is what I have to do. This is what's expected of me. And if I don't meet that expectation, there are consequences to that.
Yeah. And one thing we've talked about in the past is that, you mentioned that not only is it the sort of example of sports, but you encouraged a lot of your officers to get engaged. What was the power of having personnel engaging in sports activities, coaching, and what did you find that did for your relationship to the community?
So it builds an instant bridge. So we've had a couple of officers that have coached at the high school level in the town itself. And for one of the officers who did it, it allowed them to communicate with kids who are, at high school, are probably at an at-risk age, right? Kids at that age maybe don't always make the best decisions. So it allows for them to see a police officer in a different light. He's not in uniform, he's your coach. And so I think it allows to see you in a different light. It allows you to be more human. They can see him outside of work. And I'm sure when you experienced that with my dad, he was just a guy, a family man who had kids, who was just trying to teach a bunch of kids how to play baseball and maybe win a few games. And that's all that was. And I think the one of the biggest things that we always try to let people know is that we're people too. We're humans. We're part of the community.
Yeah. So, and Glenn, how hard was it, like, for you to, navigate something? I mean, how challenging was it to kind of walk in these rooms and talk to diverse constituents to try to show that you're an ally?
So I think for me, some of it wasn't as difficult as you would think, because most of the time, I think most people did have confidence in our police department that the events of, say, George Floyd don't happen here, haven't happened here, and wouldn't happen here. So the conversation was always centered on to make sure that, hey, are we doing everything we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen here? And, I was able to provide statistical data that shows that, hey, listen, in the previous 5 years to George Floyd, we didn't have one complaint about disparate treatment. In other words, of all the 40,000 contacts a year we have with the public, over 5 years, 200,000 contacts, not one time did we have a complaint that somebody felt that they were stopped because of their race, ethnicity, or some other non-factor.
We continue our discussion on police reform and the role of athletes in the process. Next on Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health. Welcome back to Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health, and our discussion on police reform and its relationship with the sports world. Well, you have a new lens. I mean, you're looking at things from, sort of newly retired, and congratulations on so many years of service. And, is there anything that you're kind of seeing now with, like, crystal clear from that point of view? You're from a different chair now.
You know what? Yeah. So for me, it is a job that I absolutely loved. It was an honor and a privilege to serve. It was something that I wanted to do since I was probably in first grade. So I was really privileged to follow in the footsteps of my father and my grandfather, both police officers in Teaneck. But when I look back now, I think one of the things that started before I left, but was totally different than when I started, which was we started to learn to develop the skill of just being patient, of realizing that, you know what, there are situations where we have time, and time is our friend. When I first started, everything was about hurry up, get the call done, and get out of there. And that mentality would lead to confrontation. It would lead to physical confrontation. And what we've gotten to now is a point where officers are told, hey, listen, slow things down. Let's take our time. We have time. We have nothing but time. And it allows for less confrontation, allows for less physical confrontation. And so to me, that is probably one of the best things that I've seen in law enforcement in a long time.
And it's amazing when we talk about sports, we just think of the attributes of success, and they overlap so well. And I think one data point that blew me away. I think we talked a couple of years ago. The fact that nobody had actually fired off their service revolver, service weapon over like a decades. Like the entire force just found other ways to resolve issues that didn't involve their pistol, their gun. Was that something that has continued, or what? How is that even possible, I guess, is my question.
Yeah. So when I just retired last month, and I can tell you that it's been 32 plus years now where an officer has not fired their weapon in the line of duty. So it is something we're very proud of. We're glad that hasn't happened. So it is something that, listen, we have tried to give the officers other tools to use other than just a firearm. And like I said, the mentality change, though, to me is probably one of the best things that we've done.
All right. Well, Glenn O'Reilly, I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your insight. We're all enlightened and know a lot more, and certainly patience and understanding, as you mentioned, as part of your experience as a leader and an officer. But this is what this show is about. So I just want to thank you for your time, and look forward to catching up, and let's have dinner sometime. Well, thankful to be joined by our next guest, Adam Jones, longtime Major League Baseball player, 14 years in the show, All-Star, and spoken out various times about social issues and climate, and involved in the Players Alliance, and currently in Spain, Barcelona. So, Adam, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you, man. I'm glad I was able to make some time on busy schedule, time differences. I'm just glad I was able to work, because you are one of the best in the game, and one of the mentors to a lot of guys such as myself. So when you call, I answer.
No, I appreciate that, man. And today we're talking about policing and sport, and just how a lot of times, from my experience, a lot of my volunteer coaches in the summer were law enforcement officers, and we sort of came up together in certain ways in my town. So I know you've spoken out at different times, and you've talked a lot about policing through your experiences. So I'm curious about baseball and how that connection flowed for you with respect to your relationship with police.
Well, I mean, obviously, being in a major league clubhouse for so long, you stand at the end of the dugout and there's a police officer. You take the field, there's a police officer. You enter the ballpark, there's a police officer. And me, I was new to a city, Baltimore, and I was fortunate in a good way also that the majority of the cops that were in our dugout were African Americans. So I was able to ask them questions like I'm talking to my uncle, rather than, and that's not saying anything about the other cops that were white that were in our dugout. I mean, I asked them ample questions also. It's just a way I was able to talk to the black officers and just ask them about the city of Baltimore, what to avoid, what's the crime, what's the drugs, what is going on in the city, as I was a novice to the city of Baltimore. So for me, when I first got there, it was a way for me to understand the city.
Yeah, and we've had conversations, Adam, just about, you have this relationship with police officers who are really creating safety for you, of course, the community, but it's unique as a baseball player, professional athlete. And sometimes the challenge was when there's things going on that policing is in the spotlight for something negative. It was always hard to figure out how to navigate the fact that, these officers were often keeping your family safe when you were on the road. You had these relationships. So, I mean, can you speak to that sort of challenge of just sort of balancing those two worlds?
I mean, you hit it on the head. I had my friends in the law enforcement, the residents, law enforcement that come down with our team. And I just said, someone followed me home. Here's the license plate. And they made sure that never happened again. They protect us. I think when, majority of athletes, especially basketball and football, who are heavily African-American, and just the truth is a lot of African-Americans that play the sports don't come from the rich areas. Let's just be honest. And, majority of their times, and mine too, situations with cops, especially as youth, have never been in the great standings because, why are the police in our neighborhood? There's generally a reason to make them come over. So, it was always, when I was growing up, it was always like a conflict. Like, why are they here? We don't want them here. But again, they have to come in because bad things are happening. They have to come around. Are they perfect? No. The uniform, I was having a conversation with someone today about it, and people was like, it's not the color of the person, it's the uniform.
And so with that job, like certainly sports or athletes have done a lot more in recent times to try to address their concerns around policing, law enforcement communities, all these dynamics of relationships. I mean, what have you found in terms of reaching out to figure out your voice in this?
I grew up around cops. One of my mom's best friend, Officer John, I'll never forget him. Great, still alive, but would always come around and just, in his uniform and sit on the front of the hood of the car, talk to us, congregate with a bunch of kids. And, you see the great videos of some officers playing within the neighborhood, things like that. Need to be more of a community. Now it seems like you see the cops, you're like, uh-oh. Yeah, and I think that goes for everybody. I'm in the car, I'm just like, man, I need to turn my music down, drive slow, like straighten up. And that shouldn't be the case. I should just be, I see the cops, okay, hope he's enjoying his day and keep moving on the road.
Coming up, more with Adam Jones and the role of the Players Alliance in police reform. We'll be right back on Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health. Welcome back to Classes in Session with Doug Glanville, presented by UI Health, as we continue with Adam Jones. I mean, have you been able to wrap your mind around like what we're actually seeing in this relationship between police and the communities, especially communities of color? Is it that we're seeing more? I mean, what have you come to any conclusions around it or solutions around it?
Well, someone said that it's like the world has not changed. We're just filming it. I don't know if I forgot who said that. It's nothing's changed. We're just filming it. And my whole thing is that if you know you're being filmed doing this and you continue to do this, you must know that your union is stronger than hell to try to get you out of this. Because I think people know worldwide that the police union is one of the strongest unions in the world. They're very, very powerful, very strong, very loyal to each other. It sucks because, you hear stories of incidents happening when people get, just crimes happening, people getting, killed in certain things. You hear stories about it. It's not a lot of things aren't stories anymore. It's crazy. It's just a normal person, just like, as a parent, most importantly, as a parent, you seeing these kind of things on camera, like, you mean tell me you can't diffuse the situation with this? Can you speak
a little bit about like the cultural differences? You played baseball in Japan, and and you talked about law enforcement being very different.
Well, they don't have problems with guns. That's first and foremost. You flip on the TV in any city, you pick a city in America, and it's Wild Wild West, and it sucks. So it's out there. I didn't even see cops. Like on the road, I maybe seen 3 cops on the freeway passing me. I didn't see people getting pulled over for speeding tickets. I didn't see it. I just think people followed the law. If that's the easiest way to put it. They followed the law. When COVID happened, mask up. They followed the law. They didn't say, oh, well, I need to do this. I need to have my fun. I need to have this. They said, okay, what's best for everybody. Let me do my part and do what's best for everybody, not be selfish and say, I need.
Well, and maybe part of what you're saying, you talk about a collective commitment, different societies, operate more individualistic and so on. I wonder if within that, there's a solution around policing, right?
Well, dream scenario is obviously world peace and everybody gets along. But I just think that the relationship and the trust just has to be regained with the community. Obviously, you don't trust the police until you need them. You don't, you know what I mean? It's like that. They're like, oh, I don't trust the cops. But then something happens. Oh, can you help me? I think it needs to be, can you help me? Trust from the beginning. And just, it's a two-way street. The community and the police officers they just have to coexist, because law and order is a part of the United States. I don't see the police going anywhere. Obviously, they talked about police reform, and the unbright people continuously said, "Oh, we're just abolishing the police." No, we're just moving some of the money to help out other things, because no one needs $1 billion. Okay, no one needs that much money to police. Okay, and then just allocating the money to different programs. That's all.
So, Adam Jones, man, thank you so much for your time, insights, and your honesty as always. Keep doing what you're doing. Appreciate it.
Always, brother.
There are universal principles that flow through sports, lessons that transcend level, age, success. As we face the blur of how quickly information reaches us and the real-time nature of how we evaluate systems, policing has been at the center of calls for reform. Policy matters, laws set limits, but it appears that the success of how police engage their communities lean into the same characteristics that anchor any successful team. The power of good communication, the patience to treat all people with respect, and the commitment to each other and to good work. This will not guarantee perfection, nor can it erase history of the times when this did not go well, the times when bias prevailed. It is the nature of being in the public domain with the highest stakes imaginable. But for change, for true adaptation to a diverse and constantly attentive society, not only is it important that police operate like a team built on principle, but we all have to see each other on that same team. I'm Doug Glanville. See you next time.